Today's sponsor is Advancement Courses. Stay tuned at the end of the show for a special coupon for 20% off any of their grad level professional development courses. The 10-Minute Teacher Podcast with Vicki Davis. Every weekday, you'll learn powerful, practical ways to be a more remarkable teacher today. Hello, remarkable teachers. This week, this Friday, we will have episode 300 of the 10-Minute Teacher. And as it so happens, Wednesday is my birthday. So I decided to do something special for Motivational Monday today. I'm taking one of the most popular posts of all time on my blog called What to Do When Someone Hates You and share it with you. This has been a post that has reached literally over 1 million people. So I thought it might encourage all of you podcast listeners because, sometimes at the end of the school year, there can be a little bit of drama out there. Now, this is from 2014, but I've updated it for you. So I hope you enjoy it. What to do when someone hates you. There's one way to avoid criticism. Do nothing, say nothing, and be nothing, says Aristotle. Criticism comes with breaking new ground. Criticism comes with putting yourself out there. But how do you respond when that criticism turns to hatred? Hatred is a hard thing to handle, particularly when you feel it's unjust. But I'm writing this for you today. Don't let hatred stop you. I'd like to quote from The Man in the Arena by Theodore Roosevelt. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man, or I'll add woman, who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short again and again because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who, at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. And that was excerpted from Citizenship in the Republic, given at the Sorbonne in Paris, France, April 1910 by Theodore Roosevelt. But you know what? We are all people of the arena, and every human has to cope with this question. What do you do when someone hates you? Hatred is a hard thing to handle. Us humans, we usually possess a me-centric view of the world. We've all seen two good people who can have vastly different opinions. It happens. No matter what you do, how kind you are, anything else, I promise you this, in your humanness, you will attract haters. No way around it. Haters are an inevitable part of life. If you're accomplishing anything of worth, you can decide what to do with it. It will also shock and surprise you just how long some people will nurse hatred. It can be years later and they're still hanging on to something you barely remember. So here are the tips. Tip number 1, not every criticism is motivated by hate. A person giving you constructive criticism wants to help you improve and become better. So listen to it. But a hater wants to hurt you and really wants you to die. Determine if love or hate is the basis by who gave you the criticism and how it is given. What was the intent, help or harm? But I'd like to ask this question. Why do we notice the negative so much? You can be in a crowd of 10,000 and give an incredible speech, and one critic blasts you on their blog or on Twitter, and what do you notice? You don't see the 100 positive tweets. You see the one negative, I promise you. You can captivate your whole classroom, but one student has decided to dislike you. You don't relish 29 joyful, happy learning kids. You languish because one student, and their parents usually, don't like you. I've been there, and goodness, it's hard when it happens. But we need to understand critics' math. Now, John Acuff talks about the phenomenon of critics' math in his book, Start, Punch Fear in the Face, Escape Average, and Do Work That Matters. And he calls it, like I said, critics' math. Now, here's what John said. Here's the formula. 1 insult plus 1,000 compliments equals 1 insult. Now, what does that mean? And let's look at this example. John goes on to tell the story of Larry David, the inventor of the hit show Seinfeld. Well, Larry David went to New York and went to a ball game. And when the organizers spotted Larry in the crowd, they showed his picture on the big screen and played the Seinfeld theme song as the entire stadium stood and applauded. And after the game, as Larry walks to his car, a stranger drove by, rolled down his window and yells, and pardon what I'm about to say because I'd never let somebody say it in my classroom, but I did write it, so here we go. This stranger drove by, rolled down his window and yells, "Larry, you suck." Well, which does Larry remember later? You know what Larry remembered? He remembered the one stranger. Are you kidding me? One rude person can erase 49,999 people giving you a standing ovation. It doesn't make sense. So our tip number 2 is to reject critics' math. The first step in overcoming critics' math is to realize you're doing it and refuse to go there. It is completely irrational that one criticism from a stranger can cause us to forget all of the good things. And that's what you have to remember. That stranger may not hate you. They're just a stranger and maybe they're having a bad day or some people are just fussy and everywhere they go, I think if all the fast food restaurants compared notes, they would find out that the same people are fussing everywhere. But we have to reject critics' math. And tip number 3 is we need to keep perspective. For me, when I deal with the haters, I admit there's room enough in this big, wide world for both of us. Good people can dislike me or you. I can even dislike good people. Good and evil is not determined by whether people like you or me. And this can really help us. I recall a professor in college who drew a little X at the corner of the board. And he walked all the way across the room. And on the other side of the board, he drew a cloud. Now, he pointed at the cloud and said, "This is the universe." And then he walked step across the front of the room to the tiny X and says, "This is you." And he turned around to the whole class. And then he said something profound. Notice that you, as he pointed at the X, and then he walked all the way back across to the cloud, are not at the center of the universe. And then he pointed at the cloud. And I have to say, I do use this with my students too. So we need to understand we're not at the center of the universe. But tip 4, we must center our thoughts in healthy ways. So we're not the center of the universe, but we can choose to center our thoughts daily. When hate rears its ugly head, it hurts, and yet it can get easier with time. Focus on your goals. We've got to get things done in life, and we just can't stop when we have things go wrong. Tip number 5 is focus on the likers, not the haters. So stop focusing on the futile, making the haters like you. And hopefully you don't have too many, but I think every one of us probably has one or two. Focus on the people who like you. Spend time cultivating relationships with those who like you. Perhaps they'll come to love you and you them. Focus on helping and serving others and being kind, and choose to ignore those who may be speaking negatively about you. That can quickly become paranoia. You know what? Usually people aren't even talking about you at all. I hate to tell you what I tell myself. I tell myself I'm not that important. And sometimes if I think I'm indispensable, I'll get a glass of water and put my finger in it and take it back out and say, okay, is there a mark? And of course there's not. So we have to keep perspective, realize we're not the center of the universe. And a lot of times people aren't even talking about us at all. So decide. We've already heard Theodore Roosevelt tell us clearly, it's not the critic who counts. But why do we give such critics power over us? Why do we let haters distract us from living an epic life? Tip number 6, celebrate the good times in progress. My first boss sent a memo to his manager praising my performance. He brought the copy to my desk and I was so excited. And I could not believe it. And then he told me something I'll never forget. Create an Atta Girl folder for those hard days. They'll come and you'll need to remember who you are and who you can be. This is your first Atta Girl. Keep it. And I did. I still have the folder and I've made one in Evernote. And when I have those dark days where I feel like I'm doing nothing right, and sometimes those days happen, I'll pull up my Atta Girl folder and I'll read them. Not to have pride, but just to remember that there are better days and I can improve. We all fall and we all fail. It's just part of life. Tip number 7 is to keep moving forward. Failure only becomes permanent if we stop trying. It becomes success when we learn from it. It also helps to remember the good days when the bad days come. But let's be clear about the difference between failure and criticism. Criticism is not failure. Having a hater is not failure. Being criticized and having a hater is part of being human. And if you're going to do anything really epic, you will get critics and you will get haters. And you should be glad because it means you're doing something. Sweet revenge. Dr. Phil Adler, my favorite professor, always talked about racism and sexism and how to overcome it. And it was very helpful because at the time when I was at Georgia Tech, there weren't a lot of us women there. And it was helpful because that was kind of a different environment for me. He would tell us that there were people who would not want us to be included in conversations because of our gender or race if we were a minority. He said, be so good they can't ignore you. The best revenge is success and proving them wrong. Ever since that moment in class, I've repeated this thought when faced with a hater of me or my gender. I really work hard to have success and letting that be the revenge. And then also when they come back, just being kind because, what good does it do to have revenge? That's not something I'm going to do. So tip number 8 is to be excellent in your work. Your best revenge against haters is to prove them wrong. Succeed and work your best to do a fantastic job at whatever you're called to do. I know we just want swift justice, and we want that in our me-centered world that demands it. But you know what? Life is a marathon, not a sprint. And be a turtle, as I share in Chapter 13 of Reinventing Writing. But here's who hating really hurts. Hating hurts the hater most of all. I read a story of the freed slave Frederick Douglass riding on a train through Pennsylvania. This was paraphrased from a story included in Up With Slavery by Booker T. Washington, one of my favorite books, and I highly recommend that book. Now, Frederick Douglass was told to ride with the luggage, and several white passengers came to the car to express how upset they were. And Douglass responds by telling them that he is not degraded, but that those who did this to him were degrading themselves for treating a fellow human being with disrespect. So tip number 9, commit not to hate. Hating is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Hating is like tying a dead body to your back. The body doesn't carry their lash to you, but you bear the burden. Hating hurts the hater most of all. When you're bothered by a person's hate, it gives them power over you. They can rejoice because they ruined your day. Their purpose is to wound you and to cause you pain, and they would probably only be happy if you were dead. Since there's nothing you can do to make them happy, you have to learn to live with it. So tip number 10 is to live life and live it with all you do. Don't just live, thrive, and succeed and enjoy your life. Fulfill your mission and spend time loving the 99.9% of people who don't have a problem with the fact you're breathing air at this moment. Life is too short to make a big deal of a small person. And hate does that. It has a way of making a person smaller and more incapable of success. So my friends, forgive and move on. Do whatever it takes, but let go of hate. If someone hates you, sing the song from Frozen and let it go. Haters are gonna hate. The question is, what will you do about it?
Thank you for listening to the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast. You can download the show notes and see the archive at coolcatteacher.com/podcast. Never stop learning.